story. And an obvious allegory, although not obvious enough, evidently, to those who were listening to Jesus tell it. Man builds a vineyard, sets it all up, goes off, hires people to take care of it. When he comes back, his profit would be, or his part would usually be 10% for owning the land, and allowing the others would work the land to make for their family, and of course it's an obvious allegory about God setting things up for his nation, and then when he sends the prophets, they're stoned and killed, and finally he sends the Son, and we know the story. And those hearing the story as told by Jesus would have made that association, although the chief priests and the Pharisees didn't. They realized, of course, that the story was about them. Now, for Matthew's church, and for the readers in Matthew's gospel, that story helped answer some questions. Why was Jesus killed by the religious authorities? Here's one more instance where in this time after Jesus has entered Jerusalem and has upset the temple and upset the tables and upset the powers that be, chief priests, Pharisees, the Sanhedrin. You can see the tension build, the plots against him build. Every time Jesus speaks against them, they get angrier and angrier. Why was Jesus killed? Because he was a threat to their power and control. And they believed he was a threat to the life of their nation. Because always in the past, when someone had upset God, they had been conquered by someone. And they weren't allowed to let this radical rabbi ruin their kingdom. That's why he was killed. Another question they might ask themselves is, why should I follow Jesus? Why should I leave painfully often, leave my family, leave my friends, leave my home to follow the way when my Jewish family and friends think I'm crazy to do so? That maybe I'm not only crazy, but I'm threatening the very fabric of Jewish life. Why should I follow this Jesus? Well, because he was the Son that was sent by God. That's why. It's right there in the story. He was the Son that was sent. And they might ask, why was the temple destroyed? Because by the time Matthew's readers are reading, the temple has been destroyed. After another revolution by another Jesus Bar Kokhba, and Rome finally had enough and destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. And now those who follow the way, the other Jesus, and somehow that got a little confused at times. But they were the start of it. All these problems. And now the temple's been destroyed. And now in the synagogues, when they give the benediction, they say, and a curse be on all those who follow the way. For they have brought God's wrath down upon us. So if you follow Jesus, you have been thrown out of the synagogue as well. And thrown out of your family. And thrown out of your circle of friends. You are anathema. You are cursed by the rabbis. Why was the temple destroyed? Because they killed the son. Now, for Matthew's readers, this was important. Because they were a struggling, fledgling, persecuted little group of folks trying to follow this rabbi, this Jesus, this new thing God was doing in the world. Now, 2,000 years later, it might seem to us a little rude, a little high and mighty to look at it quite that way that Matthew's readers might have. Certainly politically incorrect. It sounds a little vindictive now that we are, safe. Now that we are, maybe not, well, in many places the majority. It's always different to look at things from the minority, struggling, fledgling, we're almost been wiped out kind of existence than it is from the safe and secure and institutionalized existence. So maybe we have to look at this just a little differently. And how do we find meaning in this parable? Certainly one way is to understand that there is an assurance in this story that Jesus is who we believe him to be. One of the things we can take from this story is knowing that Jesus is the Son that was sent, the Son that was killed, the Son that we follow. Maybe we can sing with Fanny Crosby a little, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. It's always important to have that assurance because there's plenty out there to challenge you. But there's more too. And maybe we have to take the story like I did last week's story and understand that it needs to speak to us the same way it spoke to the chief priests and the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders. That we have to look at ourselves and see if God is continuing to send prophets, continuing to send those who would inform and enlighten us and show us God's way. And when we get to a point as an institution, as the church, and we start to reject those things because it doesn't fit what we've always done, or we've never done it that way, or we've always done it that way, those kind of things, then we become the enemy. As Paul would say, we found the enemy, and they is us. We become our own worst enemies because we become so survival, self-motivated that we forget what God is doing in the world around us, so we ignore it. We turn a blind eye to it. So it's a story that's a good reminder that we can never allow ourselves to get so satisfied and so comfortable that we think we've got it all together. Just got to have that little bit of, maybe I ought to check this out with God. Maybe I think what's God's doing now. And that's kind of where I left you last week, and I apologize for that, but there's a little bit more to this too, and this is kind of like Paul Harvey's second, the rest of the story. Remember that? I miss Paul Harvey.
Yes.
Here's the rest of the story. Look at this parable. a landowner who builds, plants a vineyard, builds it all up, builds a watchtower, and then puts other people in charge. I'm not sure that was the brightest thing to do. Maybe that's just the way he operates. And he hires these guys, and then he sends somebody to get the profits, and they beat him, which, really sounds kind of crazy. And then he keeps sending people, and they keep, beating and killing the people he sends to pick up in hopes that, and then when he sends his son, they say to themselves, look, if we kill the son, then we'll inherit the vineyard. Are they nuts? If you kill the son, you don't inherit the vineyard. I mean, the guys that were running the farmhands were acting crazy. And anybody hearing this story from Jesus would be saying to themselves, those farmhands are in for, they're acting crazy. They're not the only one in the story acting crazy. Because there's this person who built this whole thing and then takes off to, have it managed by those he leaves in charge. And when he sends someone to collect the profits and they're killed, what does he do? He sends another one. And they're killed. So what does he do? He sends another one. And they stone that one and he gets away. So what does he do? He sends another one. And another one. He keeps sending people to collect profit and they keep getting killed. So what does he do? He sends his son. Now everybody he sent to these guys, they're killed. So what does he do? He sends his son. Does that make sense? Not really. He's crazy. Just as crazy as the landowners that he hired. Nobody, except maybe a crazy landlord, so desperate to be in relationship with those tenants, would do anything, risk anything to reach out to them. Act more like a desperate parent, trying to reach out to that wayward child who is a landowner trying to collect profits on the vineyard. It's crazy. Jesus asked, what would the landlord do when he comes, now that they have killed the son? And it's the chief priests that say he will put those wretches to a miserable death. It's not Jesus talking. They condemn themselves. But what really happened? Did God come and destroy them? No. God came and resurrected Christ. And then what? Sent him again. Now you got to be crazy in love with people to keep sending them your son. Crazy love. Even when we reject it. Crazy love. It just keeps